Welcome everybody. This week, we're taking a little bit of a break from our STEM product focused chats to looking at AI and specifically how to leverage AI for use in the STEM classroom. Um, a brief disclaimer about what I'm going to show today. I'm going to be showing the use of a couple different generative AI um, pieces of software that you can use yourself. And everything I'll be doing is going to be live, so none of this is sort of pre-prepared. So feel free as I'm going through and giving some examples. If you have an example you'd like to see yourself, or if you might want me to demonstrate something, feel free to just put that in the chat as we go along. So today we're going to look at AI chatbots, and we're probably familiar with some of the names that I'm going to bring up here in a second. But we're going to specifically look at how we can use AI chatbots for use in the STEM classroom. And these are not just specific to STEM classrooms. I'm going to use STEM specific examples today, but if you're teaching another class outside of STEM, you definitely can use these same things in really any class in the K-12 classroom or even beyond that. So we're going to look first at how to unpack STEM standards with AI, but then build STEM lessons and experiments with AI. And then finally, how we can use AI to quickly differentiate instruction and feedback for students. So AI chatbots, if you've never heard of an AI chatbot before, AI chatbots are computer models that are trained to have human-like conversation. AI chatbots, most of the ones we're familiar with, have some sort of generative AI built into them. So these are things that allow you to create text or images, and even video was just recently sort of released public. And some of the most popular AI chatbots that we might be familiar with, Copilot is a chatbot by Microsoft. ChatGPT is obviously probably the most familiar one to most people. We hear that in the news and media most frequently. And then Magic School is one I want to introduce to you as well. Magic School is an AI chatbot or AI generative website specifically aimed for use in the classroom for educators. So I'm going to jump back and forth and give examples in a couple different softwares, just so you can see how we do some of these different things. So we're going to start by talking about how we unpack standards. So STEM standards, if you've ever read STEM standards before, they're often not written in the most understandable way, or at least a way where we can, as a teacher, quickly take and basically create a checklist of things we need to do with students or boxes we need to check essentially with students to prove or to demonstrate understanding of a specific concept. And when we look at these STEM standards, we can all have our own sort of interpretations of them. And that process sometimes is challenging for many teachers to take a standard and put it on paper into manageable or recreatable lessons and activities and benchmarks that we can have for students to achieve. So when we're unpacking a standard, what we're going to be looking for is for AI to essentially generate for us a list of benchmarks that students need to complete. And these are going to be actionable benchmarks. And once we have it do this, we can actually go a little bit further than that and have it create whatever we want. So I'm going to start out with the STEM specific example using a high school STEM standard here. And I'm going to start by using ChatGPT. So in ChatGPT, you're seeing a live view of my ChatGPT on the right-hand side of the screen. And I'm going to scroll down so you can see sort of what I'm typing in the bottom here. All right, so this is ChatGPT 4, which is the paid version, but you can experience this exact same thing in the free version. The paid version just allows you to create images, which we're not going to spend a whole lot of time with today. But we can start by essentially just prompting ChatGPT. We're going to say, I'm going to give you a standard. We'll say STEM standard. To unpack, you will provide a list of benchmarks and other important ideas students need to know. And when we're prompting AI, it's very important to first give it the prompt and really get it to make sure it understands what it's doing. So I'll ask it, do you understand? Right. And it's going to say, yes, I understand. Please give me the standard. And so I'm going to do a quick copy paste here. So I'm going to copy and paste in this high school standard. So this standard is dealing with Newton's law and forces. So we're going to copy and paste it in here and we'll see what it gives to me. All right, so with one quick single sentence prompt, essentially, and then providing it that standard copy and pasted, it's going to give me a wealth of information. So it's taken what the standard is, which is only a single sentence that says analyze data to support the claim that Newton's second law of motion describes the mathematical relationship among the net force on a macroscopic object, its mass, and its acceleration. And now it's turned this into this huge list of information that I can now use to generate content to teach to my students. Right. So it's given me what it feels are some of the most important concepts to understand, right? Talking about understanding the law, so giving it definition, direction of forces, giving a concept of the force, so calculating that force, impact of force on motion, and then manipulating the formula. It gives you all of this information, right? And if there's something here that you don't want or that you don't see that you do need, right, you can always ask it to give you more, right? So I can ask it something like, can you give me some example questions to ask students about this standard? So I can give me these questions, right? And this is just a quick way that I can generate content easily for my students to quickly interact with, right? I could ask it to give me questions. I could ask it to give me a lesson plan. I could ask it to give me an entire test based on that standard, right? And ChatGPT is always going to sort of go above and beyond and maybe even give you more than you need. But you can give it prompting to prevent it from going a little bit overboard. Right now, I want to jump over and show you what this might look like in Magic School. So if you haven't used Magic School before, Magic School is maybe a little bit more comfortable for many teachers to use. Magic School is set up as a series of tools, and each of these tools has a specific function, and the functions are all well laid out for you. So you're basically just providing information into this um, format, right? And in Magic School, I want to unpack the standard. So I'm just going to search unpack here. And I'm going to get one of the tools as the standards unpacker. So I'll select that tool. And we'll see the tool that it's given me here is a little bit more simple than ChatGPT. All right, it's asking me a grade level and it's asking me to copy and paste in the standard. So I can go ahead and do that same thing, copying and pasting in the standard. And this, I believe, is a 9th through 12th grade standard. So I'll just keep it at 9th grade. And all I have to do is click generate. Right, and very similar to ChatGPT, it's going to give me specific expectations for defining that standard, learning targets, so things, those sort of checkbox things that students need to be able to do. And then it even gives you some instructional strategies or assessment strategies in teaching and assessing this specific standard. Right.
Hey,
So with,
Jonathan, I'm going to
yeah,
pop in real quick here. Your screen is coming in fuzzy for a couple of us. Is there a way to just share the internet screen using a normal screen share instead of this new one you were trying out? Because we are not getting it in clear on our end.
yes, give me a moment.
Thank you. And thank you to the chat for letting me know it was not just me.
How does that
Much
look? Is that any
better.
better? Zoom
Yes.
sometimes with a certain number of people in a chat will compress compress videos to make things a little bit faster. So I apologize for that. But it should come across if you go back and watch the recording, the resolution should come across okay. Right, so I was showing in Magic School, the standards unpacker in Magic School is a little bit more straightforward, but there's less sort of customization that you can do. It's going to give you the standard broken down at a ninth grade level or whatever grade level you select. Right, sort of the next step from here is thinking about how we can go from unpacking a standard to start to generate actionable lessons. So things that we can do with students, whether this is a direct teaching, maybe it's group work, maybe it's an experiment that students are doing, right? So I'm going to start by just sort of demonstrating this again back in ChatGPT so we can see this. So I already gave it the standard. ChatGPT knows what standard we're talking about. Right, so I can continue this series of prompting by just asking it something further, right? So I can say, create a lesson plan for this standard, right? So I can be very generic like this, and I can have it create a lesson plan, and it's going to go through and create this lesson plan for me. But I also could be more specific, right? If I want the lesson plan to be in a certain setting, maybe it includes group work. Maybe there's an assessment as part of this lesson plan. Maybe there's even an experiment as part of this lesson plan. I can give it a little bit more of those specific ideas to work with, and it'll create those for me. Right. So this looks like it's actually giving me a multi-day lesson plan, right? So day one, it's giving me sort of a full day. It looks like a lecture is a big part of it and doing some calculation practice. Right? And then it gives you an additional day, right? Maybe I want students to be a little bit more hands-on than just doing, experiment, just doing practice problems, right? So I can give it a little bit of additional prompting, and I can say something like, include an experiment and an experimental procedure as part of the lesson. Right. So with ChatGPT, all of this is a little bit more customizable, right? You are doing the prompting. You have to think about what you want it to provide you. Right? We're going to go through and show the same thing again, but looking at it in Magic School using one of sort of the built-in tools. Right? And in this case, it's giving me an experimental procedure. It looks like it's using some, common physics lab equipment that we might find in a classroom. Right? If we wanted to use a specific set of equipment, you could provide that information to it. So maybe you're in a school that does not have a lot of lab equipment. Maybe you just have meter sticks and that's it, or rulers or stopwatches, right? You can tell it, this is all I have, write me a lesson plan on that. So that's a really helpful way. A lot of teachers avoid doing experimentation with students because of the lack of access to materials or technology. Using ChatGPT or Magic School, we can have these really quickly created experiments that use what you already have on hand, and you don't have to go out and purchase things and source the materials as needed. So looking at this in Magic School, we're actually going to go back and we're going to use a different tool for this. You can either search in the top up here, or we're going to look at the lesson plan tool. So in the lesson plan tool, again, we can select our grade level. We can also paste in the standard. So I'm going to go with a different standard just so we can see this at a different grade level. So this is a third grade standard I'm going to use here, dealing with magnetism. And I need to make sure I set the grade level to be appropriate to the standard. So I'm doing a third grade level topic, standard, or objective, right? I just copy and paste my standard in here on magnetism, right? If I wanted to provide additional criteria, this again is where I can put those things like I want it to have group work to be part of it. So I'm going to put something like that. Please include group work as part of the lesson plan. Let's generate. So here it generated an entire lesson plan for me. Right? Notice it actually even brought in some additional pieces, right? So I only gave it one standard. It actually brought in a literacy standard as well as part of this lesson plan, right? So I know sometimes in a science classroom, we don't really think beyond the standards we're supposed to be teaching, so beyond those science or engineering or mathematics standards. Um, but in reality, we are doing a lot of things outside of that. So this sort of brought that ELA standard in. So if you have a principal come into your classroom and they're observing you, right, you can say, hey, not only was I teaching science today, but I'm extending that to um, working with a literacy standard for students. Yep. And so we went through a little bit of this, and there's a lot of experimentation I can do, and I wanted to provide a little bit of time at the end for maybe you to give some suggestions or some things you might like to see. Um, but I think one of the biggest parts of this that is really easily accomplishable with AI is the ability to differentiate instruction for students, right? And this goes just beyond STEM. This goes to really any subject area. If you're having any of these generative AIs create any sort of lesson materials for you, uh, quizzes, tests, assessments, experiments, whatever it might be, um, you have the ability to change things to accommodate each individual student's needs very, very quickly. Right. So very often we run into situations in the classroom where we have students who maybe in a science class struggle in science, not because their lack of scientific knowledge, but because their lack of reading level or their lack of math skills. Right. So we can, with a generative AI tool, create a differentiated set of instructions for students who are needing those specific accommodations, right? So I know a lot of us have maybe English as a second language to many of our students, right? This is a great way for students to accomplish the same things as their peers with a adjusted version of something. So I'm just going to have ChatGPT here. I'll say create an experiment on Newton's laws, right? This might be the prompt I give to create a generic experiment for everybody, but maybe I have a student who is learning English as a second language, right? I can give ChatGPT this information and I can say, make this experiment procedure. Oh boy. For a student. So immediately it understands what the importance of that is, right? So I told it create it for a student who is learning English as a second language. And immediately it knows it needs to make the language simple, it needs to give clear instructions and even visual aids if possible. Right? So I left out some details in this, right? Maybe I want this to be for a specific grade level. Maybe I want this to be for students who have specific math abilities as well. So maybe I want them you know, maybe I'm not teaching calculus in ninth grade, so I want to avoid any calculus, or maybe I have students who can't do algebra yet, right? So I can create an accommodated experiment or procedure for that specific group of students. So this gives you a great procedure. It gives you it broken down a little bit differently. It gives you what to explain to the student and sort of what to tell them to do. So maybe a little bit different than we might see a common experimental procedure where it's just a step-by-step, numbered list of uh, steps to do in the procedure. This one's a little bit different, definitely to accommodate those students who are learning English as a second language. Right. So I covered a sort of quick jump into using generative AI for the STEM classroom today. And in doing this, hopefully you're a little bit interested in what the possibilities might be for your own class. So I want to go ahead and give us just a little bit of time at the end here, see if anybody has any questions or wants to see any examples, maybe specific to the content that you're teaching. And I'll leave this up here just to think about what's coming up. So next week we have Braden, who's going to be talking to us about the lab disk during our next STEM Wednesday, which is going to be next Wednesday, which is April 24th. And that's happening at the same time, so 4 p.m. Eastern. And like always, we record all of these and we post them all to our YouTube channel, so you have the ability to go back and watch them if you missed them. So Hannah asked an interesting question. So how accurate is the science in these sources, and do we need to fact check them? Right. So AI is trained based on large data sets. So these are called large language models. They're fed a whole bunch of information, and they regurgitate based on what they know. Right? So it's very possible that in one of these there is some false information, and there's definitely examples of people who've been able to get AI to write a convincing argument of why the Earth is flat or why the moon landing is fake, and some of these contentious false facts in science. So you always have to think about fact checking things. When we're talking about things that are happening in the K-12 classroom, most information that these models are trained on are very reputable sources. So we don't have to worry about too much in fact checking. The one place where we do have to worry about maybe false information happening is if you're using AI to generate um, solutions to math problems. So there's specific prompting you need to do to get it to generate correct solutions. And that's a different sort of topic for a different day. So you always have to sort of check the math. So I see Kate asking a question in the chat. Does Magic School have scaffolding capabilities for lesson plans? So an example is having different exit tickets for students or more advanced students. Right. So down at the bottom, and when we're in, let me go back, I shared my other screen. So in Magic School, down at the bottom, you always have this action bar. Unfortunately, I'm just in a free trial. So if you wanted to adapt anything in Magic School, that happens with their paid account. But down in the bottom in this sort of chat bar, you could put in an additional prompt saying that you want different exit tickets for ESL students or more advanced students, and it would generate those individual things. With ChatGPT, you can do that without the free version, but you have to be a little bit more versed in the prompting. That's one of like the paid for features in Magic School. So the answer is yes, but in Magic School specifically, you have to pay for it. I just saw another question in the chat talking about how some of these lessons that they create things, they might say sort of general things like measure the acceleration. Some teachers don't have the background to know ways to do that. Right. So once again, that comes back to prompting the AI. So if you don't understand the lesson plan it gave you, you can always go back in and ask it a question on how would you do that, or ask it for examples of what that might look like. So for example, if I'm looking in ChatGPT here and it's asking me to summarize right here in the conclusion, review what happened during the experiment. Right? If I don't know what to expect to happen during this experiment, I could ask it, what could I expect to happen during this experiment? And I can even ask it, can you give an example of a conclusion for this experiment? And so this is the way for it to dig deeper, right? And this is very common, right? When we are teaching a broad, range of subjects in the classroom, every teacher doesn't know everything they're teaching. And that's something that we have to sort of admit to ourselves as teachers. So this is a good tool for you to sort of refresh knowledge and even gain new knowledge as you're reading through something. This is also a great tool if you already have an experimental procedure. Maybe you have a textbook, maybe you have a guide that you're following for your class and some curriculum that you already have. You could take and copy and paste that into something like ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot and have it give simulated responses. Like, what are some, you know, data points that I would expect to see from this experiment? Or what's a conclusion that I could expect to draw from this experiment? Those are all great things that you can use AI for. All right. Do we have any other questions? So once again, next week, Braden is going to be joining us for STEM Wednesday on April 24th at 4 p.m. And he's going to be showcasing the 4 different models of the lab disk and sort of talking about how you can leverage them in schools and using them for making learning fun for students. Hopefully you will join us for the rest of the year. We have sessions going through towards the end of May, and we're going to be taking a break for summer. But stay tuned. We have some exciting things coming up, including the release of some new products, which I won't spoil yet. But I hope you can join us in future weeks.